Hello everyone, most welcome to Web Water Talk Series 1. This is the episode number 2. Today we are going to hear 3 more speakers here, 3 more stories. So today this water story session will be shared by Dr. Jila. Just I welcome Dr. Jila by introducing him. Dr. Jila is the assistant professor in Tata Institute of Social Science, Guwahati campus, Center for Peace and Conflict Studies, School of Social Sciences and Humanities. Dr. Jila is a historian by training. Before joining Tata Institute of Social Science in 2013, he taught history at Kirori Mal College, University of Delhi. He has been a visiting associate fellow at the Center for Study of Developing Societies in Delhi. Thank you, Jila, for coming to share this session. You are most welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Disasters when it comes to water, but I'm hoping that, if not today, at least in the course of the series, we would also get to hear more stories of living with water, right? Because we can't live without water. There are different ways, different relationships, different traditions, right? We survive around water, right? Historically also, because I'm a historian, I'll just give you one sort of important element when we think about history. Is most of the civilizations, early civilizations, actually evolve around water bodies, right? Human settlements, even before civilizations, were around water bodies. So water is in that sense integral to human society. And I think when we talk about water, we might also talk about this other element, which is not just about disaster, because if we focus, I think, too much on water, it becomes a very narrow way of looking at our relationship to water. And I'm hoping that some of the presentations in the series would touch upon those issues. I would invite the 3 speakers for today and listen to their stories, their insights on what they have done on water. And then we can take up questions once all 3 of them have presented, right? So first we hear from Arunachal, the story of Siang, from Ranju Dodum. Ranju Dodum is a journalist from Itanagar. He's going to tell stories about the river Siang. It would be followed by Manoj Gogoi. Manoj Gogoi is again, has experience working with various media organizations. He also teaches and has worked on issues of water. And then we have Oruf, an old friend who's sort of a multi-talented person. So we will get to hear from Oruf, as a third speaker. So then let's begin with Ranju Dodum.
Hi, Jila. Thank you so much for giving us that very precise but brief history of our relationship with water, with rivers. And here I am, talking about the Siang. And I know the first thing that when we talk about the Siang, the first thing that comes to everyone's mind, anyone in the know, is hydropower and dams. And while the story that I wrote about, that I focused on, does have a component of hydropower and of dams, this story actually focuses more on the annual floodings that have taken place in the past, in the last 2 decades or so. Now we're all familiar with how the Siang flows into Assam, becomes the Brahmaputra, and then there is annual flooding of the Brahmaputra in Assam, and how devastating its impacts can be, or are on an annual basis. But a lot of the stories of the same river in the upper reaches do not get the same kind of media attention that it probably deserves. So the place that I actually focus on, because the Siang is such a long, a large river, I actually touched upon this particular place called Merbo. It's in East Siang district, which is the district where the oldest town of the state is. Pasighat is the headquarters of East Siang, and Merbo, that the entire area is around 10 kilometers. 10 kilometers from Pasighat. Even within Merbo, the area of focus for me was this cluster of 9 villages who uh, the people who live there, the people who live there are primarily the Adi people, and there are also some missing families as well. So the Adis and the missings have shared history and culture. So and for them, the Siang is an important. It's almost a holy river, while it's not necessarily akin to how the Ganga is for most Hindus, but it is sort of it does sort of have a cultural and religious significance to the people, to the Adi people. Now, unlike how rivers in most plain areas tend to be used, the rivers in Arunachal are not really suitable for irrigation purposes. As in, you cannot necessarily build canals or direct or divert the water from those rivers, because the river is large, and then the currents are strong. So you can't necessarily use them directly for irrigation purposes. But as we all know, that rivers have wide underground networks. So these 5 major rivers in Arunachal, the Kameng, the Subansiri, the Siang, the Lohit, and the Dibang, they do actually help to keep the land fertile, and that in itself indirectly has an effect on the vegetation of the place, the agriculture of the place, and the horticulture of the place. So the rivers are very important for across the state. Now, this particular stretch of the Siang, this is just before it enters Assam. It's in the foothills of Arunachal, and so the flow of the river becomes a little more mellow than it is in the upper reaches upper reaches in other parts of the state. So it's a little mellow, but it's still a wide river. It's still a strong river. Now, due to rainfall, heavy rainfalls and monsoon, we would always often see, periodically there would be increase in the water levels, but never to such alarming levels as it happened for the first time in 2000, in the year 2000. Around 30 people had died during that flood during the flood that time. The problem that happened during that time was, and still actually continues to be, that we don't know what actually caused this sudden flooding of the Siang in 2000, because on the Chinese side, while there is data sharing of water release, Delhi said that this was a natural phenomena that happened in Lhasa, but we're not sure. Even the Chinese said that there was a natural dam in the Tibetan Autonomous Region that had collapsed and caused a landslide and led to an increase in the water flow, and that's what led to that flood in 2000. Now, since then, there has been an increase in the instances of unnatural flooding, rather I would say flooding of mass of a larger nature than it was previously ever recorded. During these things have happened over the last few years. The Siang again came into the news in, I think it was in 2017, late 2017. That's when the turbidity of the water was noticed. The water had turned almost black in large parts of the river, and it was actually brought to notice, brought into the notice of the national media and the center as well. Again, we're not sure what happened, why it happened. Because the Chinese, because there's lack of information sharing from the Chinese side. So we don't know what's happening. There are people in the state who say that maybe it was the Chinese who are looking to divert the river. Maybe they're doing some construction activities, which caused the waters to turn black. But it was not just that the waters had turned black, but the flow of the water had increased, the water levels had risen, and that again caused major floodings. Now, in this area, in the Merbo area, these 9 villages that I'm talking about, I met a couple of families. I'll just talk about this one family, this husband and wife, the Bidesor Parme and Gomoni Pertin Parme. Now, they had moved from their old village in 92 after they were married, and when they moved to their new village, New Borgoli, the river, the Siang, was around 5 kilometers from their homes. When I visited last year, I saw that the river was actually just 100 meters away from them. That's how the river had expanded. In fact, there was actually a different river. There was a smaller stream that flowed near the river. That river is no longer there. It was the Sibia River, that the smaller stream that flowed near the village. That river has been engulfed by the Siang, because the Siang had flooded so much that the smaller river was, we could say that the river had died. The smaller river had been engulfed by the bigger Siang, and this all these started happening this was in 2018. So in 2019, the villagers, they got together. They started to take their own measures to how do you control the river. Now that in itself is an irony of, how can you ever control a river? But that's what they try to do. They try to at least try and see if they could divert the flow of the river in terms of to slow down its speed, so that the river was not hitting the banks, in a parallel manner, and so that they could divert it, so that the flow, the speed of the flow would decrease. Now they try to do it with their own sustainable materials that they had. They used bamboo. They built bamboo porcupine structures, porcupine structures to try and divert the flow of the river. But those tools, I think, at the end of the day, can only help to a certain extent. At the end of the day, you need stronger materials, which they approach the government. This story was actually, I'm doing a horrible job of explaining the nuances and the details of what went into the story. The stories actually there's so many factors with regards to international cooperation of data sharing of the river waters, the efforts done by the villagers themselves who try to control the flow of the river, or at least divert the flow of the river. Then how they approach the government. They approached the government, and the government took notice. Then there was a central scheme from the Northeast Council that had been approved. The project had been approved, and that was ridden with corruption. The government scheme actually tried to, in fact, block an entire section of the river by building a dam-like structure, which did not even last that one season. Within that very season, when the monsoon rains began again, a large section of that structure was washed away, and then the Siang again came into the villages, came near the homes of people who were living alongside the riverbanks. Now I heard that there was another new government proposal. So there's more money to be made again. The government will again put in another scheme to build a water anti-erosion scheme that will again benefit whoever the powers be. But I just got an update yesterday from one of those people, one of the villagers. They said that the rivers again, we have, in the last 3 weeks, we've seen massive rains, and those rains have again caused the Siang River water levels to increase, and it's again causing the same problems that we saw in the last 3-4 years. So this cycle we are again on the same cycle again. I don't know where we'll go from here. I don't know what the next move will be. I don't know if if the government scheme is going to work, or people are actually scared that they may have to again abandon their villages and move away from the rivers. But my question is, how long can you keep hiding or keep running away from from the river? How many times can you move? How many homes will you change? And it's not just the human cost. There's the cost of loss of livelihoods. There's cost of loss of biodiversity. So these are things that I had tried to focus on in this story. Like I said, I'm doing a horrible job of explaining the issues that we have. But if there are any questions specific to the stories that to the Siang, then I think I would be able to speak a bit more eloquently on that.
Thanks, Ranju. Perfect timing. So the next one is going to be by Manoj Gogoi.
Hi, everybody. First of all, that in the initial time, 2-3 decades ago, the place was the population was very low. Now, although it is called as an urban area, but it is I will tell it is a semi-urban area, and the population will be hardly 5,000 to 6,000, and now the water situation. So water problem is created. Now people are suffering because now most of the people are buying water only because the waters are contaminated. Highly contamination is here. It is iron is here. Sometimes arsenic, fluoride, etc. is found in the water. In the Guwahati area, and earlier people collected water from open sources like ponds, and they also collected water by hand pumps. Now we see that most of the places, particularly in the southern and western part of the Guwahati, are buying water for their household uses, for drinking, etc. And when I talk to the women, they are told that they need at least rupees 80 to rupees 100 to buy the household water for a day. So it's a very big amount, a huge amount for those who don't have any dependable source of income. And it is happening here, and I also ask them, how do you identify the contamination? Then that also that when we see the nails, teeth, then they can identify that the color changes immediately, and the groundwater is also depleting faster, very rapidly. And earlier it was found in 20 feet, and now it is depleting probably 5 to 10 feet, and these are the situation in Guwahati. And here is one water testing center. People can taste their water qualities, whether it is safe for drinking or not. But when I met the officials from the center, public health engineering departments, then they told me that the people don't come. We have testing kits of rupees in crores, but people are not coming to this place because they need 772 rupees for testing their water. And this is the our condition in Guwahati area. And many water bodies, like it was once, it was 3 decades. I earlier told you that 3 decades ago it was it is not urban, now it is suburban. There were many sources of water, like there were some streams and rivulets and some wetlands and ponds, but all are now vanishing. That is disappeared from the place. And so the water scarcity is coming up, and we also see that rainfall pattern is changing here. The rainfall, whether it may be the climate change or for any other reasons, I don't know, but probably it is the climate change, and the rainfall now in this season, in this monsoon season, the rainfall is very low because people face the drought-like situation here. Now, today we can say that in the towards the end of this month, August, people are facing severe floods in adjacent areas of Guwahati. I see that it is a very sensitive story because most of the people are buying water, and some public places like hospitals and others, they need also the clean drinking water. But clean drinking water is not easily accessible. They install some sand filters, and they are working on it, and they are cleaning the water. So, but the filter don't last long. In agrarian situations, also in agriculture, the water, because it is the water, the rainfall pattern is changing. So, but now this year I can say that people are trying to grow water resilient crops like a bow rice, but they can grow due to lack of water. And on the other hand, in the high altitude area, when they planted rice, many weeds come up, and this is the story from Guwahati.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing those experiences from the field. For one, note that this is a story that is becoming quite common in many other places in the Northeast as well. So I'm sure there would be others who would be able to share similar stories to the one that we just heard. Next, we will move to Orup.
Thanks, Zila. The story is actually on Guwahati in a way. It actually started with my personal experience. And it's a very simple. It's not it's without any criticality or even in an academic way. I just wanted to share my personal experience along with others. How within last few years, within just a span of a time of 10 years, like in 2010 to till now, how things have changed in terms of how a struggle for water is there in Guwahati. It is very interesting when I thought of writing on this story. I just look at my own personal experience at my home. So in 2000, around 2010, when I was in Panos, many of you know, I was in a meeting, and that time used to use water from a tube well. That was the only source at our home, and it's Assam time host. You guys have seen it. So that tube well, suddenly the water stopped coming from the tube well, and so I called up the plumber, and he said that maybe there is a problem in the pipe, in the iron pipe. So he suggested that maybe we have to dig a little bit more. So that time around 30 to 40 feet, within 40 feet of underground, we used to get water. So he asked me for to dig another 20 feet. Then I agreed. So that day when he dig for another 20 feet, then water didn't come out. And he again dig for another 20 feet, I mean around 80 feet. So there was no water. Then he with a very nervous face says, Dada, there is no water in the ground. So I was very scared, because we have been using water and there has been so much of water, available water. I was also having a ring well nearby the tube well. So that day for our relief, for our comfortability, he connected the motor pump to the well, ring well, where water was, like within a feet of around 5 to 7 feet, we used to get water. But from that day onward, we lost our, water from the tube well. Tube well was completely closed. And the plumber, he told me in a very, in a sad tone that, Dada, if the water from your ring well dries up, you better leave this area, this Beltola area, because there won't be any water in this area. So since that time, we started using around 2011 to 2010, we started using water from the ring well. That was fine. But that was, a signal, some of kind of signal how water was disappearing. So later, I gradually, I tried to explore, really water was so, and at the same time, water logging started in our area in 2011. 2012, water logging started in 11 area. And in my house, there has to be, when there is heavy rain, there will be around 2 feet of, height of water will be there in my compound. So by 2011, I have to earth fill my compound by 2.5 feet. So, so now I do not have, that only one stairs, not even 6 inches of is there of my original house. It is almost like a stairs. So within 2 years, around from 2010 to 2012, things took a drastic sense. And we had to earth fill my area compound by almost 3 feet. Our tube wells stopped giving water. Then I started looking around the area. So earlier we used to have, we used to have a long open field in front of our house. Then tree construction came out there in the whole area. Then they started deep, and from 2010 to 11, what I realized after talking to people from 2000 to 11, 12, they actually started deep well boring. And surprisingly, when I talk to this new culture, they will invest around 5 to 10 lakhs of money for deep well boring. And how deep they go? Because I was not there, because I used to get water within 40 feet of digging. They go around 800 to 900 feet, and there are many deep well boring in our area now. So when they started all this deep well boring, the water which was there, for the tube wells and others, particularly for tube wells, ring wells, somehow the water pouring from some of the, I don't know whether it is there, but if we use it like what 3-4 houses, because I stay alone, only one family, it is fine. But if we like, we have experience in our neighborhood that if they give rent to 2-3 families, even water of whoever is maintaining in a ring well, that also goes down. So that that is a now scenario. So now the water, within few years, the water has gone so, it's become a complete scarcity. And in my area, Beltola, which is actually very water rich, is now, if you have family rented families and all that, you need to buy water. Sometimes you need to buy water. And interestingly, now we got around 2014, we took water from the government supply. And what is government supply? Again, deep water, deep boring, deep well boring. They also sometimes are not, and one deep well already in few months back, after I wrote the story, actually, they used to get water in around 500 feet. Now it is not coming from there. They have again gone down around 800 feet or something like that. So this is a scenario in Beltola. I would like to add one thing. Around 2005, we used to have in Beltola Lokhi Mandir, in the main street, when the road expansion was going on. At that time, it was a single lane, only one. It was not 2 lane. So that time, when there was there was a well, a ring well in the middle of, in the side, by the side of the road and near the footpath. So all around, the people will take, all the businessmen, small hawkers, small businessmen, roadside businessmen, everybody used to take the water from that well, ring well. And it was very, everybody used that water. But when the road was expanded in 2005 or 6, that well was completely closed. So this is how government worked. That ring well was closed. And for people, even for small shopkeeper also, they now buy water. And now around this area, people buy drinking water. A lot of people regularly buy drinking of that 50 rupees or 50 rupees big bottle. They regularly buy it in our area. Earlier that culture was not there. So that is one of the experience I see herein. But I also in my testimonies that is in the paper, I have seen that happened in same situation happening also in like Hatigaon area, where there used to be water, but once big construction came out, and with the big construction, coming up, the waterlogging also started, because one of the reason is that some of the people whom I talk, they said that once the big construction come up, they completely cover their ground with beautiful tiles, for which the rainwater, don't get the chance to penetrate to the ground. This is one of the reason the groundwater is drying up here, and the water on surface is the volume of water on the surface is very high. It goes directly to the road, and road to the drain, and it's become, the water logging started in many areas, particularly in Beltola and Hatigao area. There was no water logging earlier. So with the coming of big apartment, 5 stories and 3-4 stories, big apartment flats, they also don't leave any space for open, for where the rainfall can be absorbed by the ground. So up to the almost like in a belt area, many areas one by one, every house is completely covered by beautiful tiles till to the main road. So water that comes to the rain, that will fall on the ground, then it will flow to the street to the drain, and that will create a lot of water logging. That is one. So this is one of the means every area that is there. Interestingly, in hill area, like in Kahelipara, there are a lot of people in a small hilly area, they stay. Earlier, even up to 2010 till 2010, they used to have water in their through their ring well. Particularly in the rainy season, in the monsoon, there was always water. But in winter, there was difficulty for water. So they also started. What they used to do in Kahilipara areas, the 5 to 10 families will come together. They will go to the some plain areas nearby, and they will raise money for deep well boring. Now even those deep well boring are not also not giving water. So these are what experience in my personality. I try to explore how water scarcity is there, and what the struggle is there, how it is from water independent, how people are water, there was a liberty for water, how there was independent in terms of water. Now completely they have turned back to dependency on water, dependency, like you have to buy water, they have to buy drinking water. Even if you construct a big house, there will be difficulties to maintain and give water to everybody. So these are there. But interesting point is that what I think in terms of Guwahati is actually at least few forget about Brahmaputra. In Beltola, we have the Bahini River. The Bahini River is a small stream. It is kind of normal called, though locally we call it river, Nodi. It may be by scientific terms or by other definition, it may be rivulet. But what is that? Bahini River has the water from Bahini River, actually, the river originates in Meghalaya. Bahini, Bokhista, these are the 2 rivers. Forget the Vorolu. But this river always have little bit of water, always, almost. Bahini River, I have seen, there is always, it flows through the Beltola to then it goes to the Soy Mile to then it's also, I think, reached then Zuro, that side. But this river is almost dead now. It's dirty people there, people throws garbage and everything. But if you go some old literature of the area, they have taken name of this river as a very sacred, like Bokhista River is related to the Bokhista Mandir and the Muni, so this river, despite they have respect, or they have religious values to the rivers like Bokhista, this river has become drainage, completely drained. They only carry garbage. So that is a sad part. I think through Guwahati, because of our mindset of modernity, or whatever we say, we do not look at the rivers. We think those are the drain in Guwahati, and people are mostly migrated from other parts of the Guwahati city. City people are like that. They don't ever know the history of the area or something like that. But there are many rivers. Korolu is the main river within in the heart of the city. But all the small river, we could have been, there could have been a beautifully could have been use the water of that, because these small rivers create, flood sometimes, because when water comes from Meghalaya, these are the river, they get flooded in some areas. So these are, my exploration in terms of the Guwahati, how, and I wanted to try to tell the stories that how a Guwahati is actually supposed to be a water-rich area, and it is actually, but how we people have completely destroyed the whole structure, and the Beltola area where we used to get water last 10 years back, and that is not just a recent time. We used to get water within the range of 40 feet. Now we dig up to 800 to 900 feet. This is how, and next what? So this is my personal expression, and I wanted to tell all this in a very simple manner through my story. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arup. In the like last 8 years or so that I've stayed in Guwahati, it's actually a similar story that I have seen in the part that I have lived since 2013, which is the Karguli area. And it's in fact quite an irony because we live next to the river, like the Brahmaputra, right? And yet there is water scarcity that you see in these areas. So the interesting part, which is also the irony, and we'll come back to this issue later, about water, is that there is the problem of flood if there is more water, and then there is also the problem of water scarcity, right? And especially in urban areas, especially in a place like Guwahati, we face both. You have water scarcity as well as flood, and Guwahati has had to experience both, for a very for quite a long time now. Despite the fact that, as Arup very rightly pointed out, despite the fact that Guwahati actually has a lot of these water bodies, like you have the big river Brahmaputra, you have the smaller rivers which crisscross the city, and then you have these lakes, right?
Yes, Dipperbill and all these, yes.
Yeah. So it is in that sense, I think, incredible, right? If we really want to study the issue of water, Guwahati is in that sense, I think, a very good example. A case study of Guwahati, just to see how in a place which is which has abundance of water, you can still face contradictory problem, either scarcity or excess, which is flood in the same city. So I think we can actually begin to think about what does it then mean to think about water in a place like Guwahati. The solution, which is again incredible, is to bring in private players, right? So in order to deal with the question of water scarcity in Guwahati, you now have, it's actually very close by to where I live, you have this massive construction which has been going on for a few years, right? Next to the governor's bungalow, which is built with Japanese money, right? So you have private investment, big capital, not small players, big capital investing money in order to deal with the question of this problem, right? This problem of water scarcity. So I think there is actually a series of connected developments that we can think about, right? And the solution that is always offered to us is via this big capital, right? And we saw that in the case of Siang as well, which is that these experts come and then they tell you that, oh, you have this problem, now we're going to give you a solution. And the solution is in the form of this big infrastructure, right, where there is money. So I think we need to sort of connect all of these, like from the very small personal experiences that one has to that of the movement of big capital, which is investing in water in the Northeast, right? I'm sure there are questions, points that people would like to share. So I would invite others to make their points.
Manoj, you're talking about wetlands and ponds are vanishing. So what are the, if you can just give us an idea of how this vanishing thing is happening, like who are the main people involved, or
Actually, in the earlier periods, that 2-3 decades ago, the people were the number of people was very low. So now the population is increasing, and now the people are occupying the places, and now they are building their houses and the government offices in those places. So these are the vanishing, and some of the small rivulets that has been blocked by the household uses, and thus these are disappearing from the area. But it still exists in some parts in the vicinity, 3-5 kilometers away. There may be the wetlands, but that's too in very dilapidated conditions that has also been encroached by the peoples, by the farmers. So these are the numbers are very decreasing, very the situation is very pitiful.
If there is any other question, we can take that off in the meantime.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you for the discussion. I really liked all the points put forward by the panelists. I had one question though. When it comes to water sharing arrangements, or there was a certain talk about the water scarcity being felt in Guwahati, and I grew up in this city. And I always kind of came across conversations amongst family members where my parents would often say that we could not even think about buying water. But I think nowadays you see rampant construction of flats and multiple floor living apartments all across Guwahati, which has definitely depleted the freshwater levels. But at the other end of the story, I also felt that there is a very secretive sort of a power dynamic between different communities. Dominant communities always seem to have a say in terms of how water would be managed in a particular city, whether it is in the form of politicians or whether it is in the form of, water supply boards. And, like to a great extent, we know that cities across the different states, we know who are in power, right? So do you think to a certain extent when we think about water scarcity, that aspect of community control of water resources, which again is to a certain extent also being challenged because of coming up of big capital and private construction companies, especially in cities like Guwahati, do you think that there is a certain side of the story that we are perhaps not seeing? And also, how would you like to really talk about it, because it's a huge political issue? And I also have a question to Ranju. Ranju, I am an outsider, but I always wanted to ask, when it comes to managing water resources in Arunachal, last year I think there was a huge flood as well. How would you think, as someone who comes from the state and as someone who comes from one of the indigenous communities of the state, how would you say is the proper way to kind of, go about, writing a new future as far as water resource control management is concerned? What is your view on that? I'll stop here. Thank you.
Arup, would you like to respond to that?
Okay, so in terms of urban areas, the one thing, some of the things we cannot, think or plan, or the way we can talk about a water problem or a river or this, our cultural aspect or something like that, in like in a smaller in a village or some other areas. So Guwahati's whole water scarcity or whatever there is, it has to be go through the planned and program, what kind of policies there along with the government. That is the most thing. Here, if we talk about communities, in a different term. So people will pay tax, people will need water. Whatever you ask people to do, urban people, they will do it. But when it comes to supply of water, providing water, it has to be the provider has to be the government. What kind of policy they have, what kind of what kind of work they are doing. Last many 10 years, we have seen the pipes. They are digging up roads, good roads. They construct roads, then dig up, then put pipes. But what? So holiness that has to be go through a planned way. Here we cannot expect people, particularly people now. A lot of people migrated, mostly to migrated city. Guwahati has now around 10 lakhs of people. By the next census data, maybe it will be around 12 lakhs. I don't know. So it's almost like Arunachal Pradesh, how now in terms of people. So this has to be very planned manner. This has to be done, and when there is a how you're going to utilize the available sources. Is there any plan with the capital coming up, as Zilla has pointed out? Are we ready to utilize the capital? But capital money has been always pumped to these areas, not in Guwahati, in the northeast. That has been the way they have kept busy the politician. They have kept busy the contractor. The money has been always pumped. Like one who is talking about the big dams on long back in 2010, there was a discussion on Subansiri. So someone told me, I forgot his name. He told me that whether the Subansiri Dam will be as successful or not successful, that not the question. But while building the Subansiri Dam for 30 years, people will make money. That is the main point. So those things are there even when it's come to Guwahati also. So in Guwahati, it's completely in urban area. The waters, if we see this is a problem, it has to be solved by the government.
Yeah, this is definitely, I think, a point that needs to be taken up and looked into seriously, because it's at the end of the day, it's also about urban governance, right? How are people responding to the question of water being privatized? And I think what is happening, just to put my two bits here. People are buying water. A large section of the population in Guwahati are already buying water, but from smaller players now, right? So you have these water tanks. If you go in the evening or early morning, especially near the High Court area, you would actually see this, this long line of water tanks, yeah? Which is taking water directly from the Brahmaputra. And then selling it in different parts of the city. So people are buying water, but what will happen is, in the future, this would become sort of more organized, right? So it would not be these small players who are selling water, but it would be more organized, and they would also be able to then control the prices, right? Because it would be only one supplier who would then tell you how much to pay. Otherwise, you would not get water in your homes, right? So I think the real challenge is no longer about privatization, but about monopolizing that water distribution system. And I think that has become the real concern. It's no longer privatization. That, in a way, is already on its way. So now it's actually about monopoly over distribution of water. Yeah, yeah. There was another question which was also addressed for Ranju. So if you would like to quickly respond to that question, which was about water resource management, I think.
Yeah. Hi, Shivangi. I'll just quickly touch upon the question. The thing is, I think it's an important question that you raise, and for us in Arunachal especially, it's a major cause of concern and an issue, not just when it comes to water resource management and mitigating the issue therein, but also it's a conflict of new needs, new modern needs, as opposed to our traditional lifestyles. if we lived the way we did, even 50 years or 60 years back, because in the new modern infrastructural developments that have taken place in Arunachal, or even the cultural developments that have taken place in Arunachal, have happened much more recently than in the other northeastern states. So for us, for so many of our indigenous communities who are still so deeply rooted in the old way of life, having to adjust to the modern needs, the needs of our modern life, they're at such conflict with one another that it is really a difficult question for me to answer. I don't have the answer. I personally, I think at the end of the day, it's discussions like these at a larger level, at a more rural level, at a more ground level, that needs to be held. We need to discuss with the people affected on the ground. We need to talk to villagers. We need to talk to farmers, people living near rivers. We need to speak to them and educate them about the harms of excessive use or excessive mismanagement of water resources, and in fact any other resources that we have. I think the only solution that I can see is talk and more talk. I think that's the only solution that we can have.
Yeah, thank you. If there is any other question, Amba Jamir, if you can ask first.
Thank you. I think all the three speakers have spoken very well, and thank you very much for sharing your points of views. Just an observation is, when we talk about water, and especially in urban areas, a big question that arises is the whole issue of water governance. And when we talk of water governance, the issue of unregulated deep bore wells that are just popping up left and right everywhere. And I think this is a major concern that really needs to be plugged in. I've been in Guwahati for almost, since my transfer here, is almost 23 years. And the amount of deep boring that we witness and that is happening, it's happening not only by resident welfare associations and private home owners, but also political parties. For example, right down my lane, there are two deep bore wells, barely 200 meters apart. And one has been built by the local BJP unit and the other by the Congress unit. And people are, happily taking water, like I'm getting it from the BJP people, I'm getting it from the Congress people. So this whole issue of politicization and taking advantage of people's miseries by different players really needs to be looked into. And I think this whole, when we talk about privatization of water, I was just trying to go back to some old seminar that happened much before the COVID times. And I was reminded of a talk where somebody mentioned that across the world, the Transnational Institute, they had done a study together with the Public Services International Research Unit. And what they observed was that across almost 180 cities across 35 countries, there is a whole process of remunicipalization of water, which means basically that the municipalities have started taking back the responsibility of distributing water from private agencies, because these private agencies were not looking at water from a comprehensive, from a holistic manner, except for making money. They were not investing in development and planning and management of water resources, except for making money. And I think that's something that will happen if we just give our water supply systems to private agencies. Thank you. So that was just an observation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for those points. I think we'll have to end the session. So if the three speakers have very quick, a few lines that they would like to make.
Yeah, it's a very interesting discussion after a long time. Knowing all the perspective and from Ranju and Manoj also. So I think we should carry on this study, and more stories should be there. We will be discussing, and how my particular interest in not only in, but I think very important for us to work on the small streams, or because like Bosista River and Bahini River, you cannot find any information on those rivers, even in Google. Nothing. One line sound, two lines you can find. So these are, sometimes the river is also disappearing. At the same time, their history will also disappear, and the information also disappear sometimes. So some of these are very dangerous in a way. So I think with keeping the larger picture in mind, all the dam and rather bigger problem related to water. But I think also we can develop some program to work on small rivers, small slant rivers, urban rivers who was dying, and even small rivers in other parts of the area. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, those are, I think, very important suggestions.
Yeah.
Manoj Gogol, would you like to make just a few points? Yeah.
We need to continue work on this issue.
Ranju, final thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me here. I just want to add just 2 points. It's a great initiative to have these discussions. I hope that we can translate these discussions into actions, not just from our end that actions that we do, but also try and influence policymakers, influence the public, the people who are affected by these issues, and and mobilize actual change that is required.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you especially the three speakers for sharing with us. Ranju Dodum, Manoj Gogoi, and Aurobjyoti Das. And I think we need to have these conversations more, right? So this series, I think, I've learned a lot from today's, and I will be tuning in, in the following series as well. What I really wanted to point out in 2 sentences is the question of what do we do, right? So one option is for us to think about ethical consumption, right? As individuals, we make choices about what to do of water consumption. But the other, I think, which is more important is as a collective, what do we do as a collective, right? So if we stay in an urban area, what do we do? If we stay in a rural area, what do we do as a collective, right? And one of the, I think, ways to do is to make our voices heard, so that our representatives, or in the assembly, in the parliament, also know that we are keeping watch on their actions, right? And I think once we do that as a collective, once we make our voices heard, then only we will be able to make these larger changes. Yeah. So those are my my learnings from today's session. Thank you very much for having me here.